This week I read a quote from the Sufi poet Rumi that really caught my attention and my imagination. The beginning of the poem says, "The hurt you embrace becomes joy. Call it to your arms where it can change." The hurt you embrace becomes joy. Call it to your arms where it can change. I wanted to explore this idea because it wasn't to me readily obvious what in the world he was talking about. How is it that our embracing hurt can become joy? So I decided to explore that, and of course we know that in our world, part of hurt or trauma, emotional pain is part of life. It's just part of what happens in life. And yet there seems to be a way, Rumi seems to be implying there's a way to transmute the pain into joy, to sort of lift the blanket of suffering off of us. Obviously we can't control things that happen to us, but there seems to be a way to move from the trauma, the hurt, the pain, to a place of joy. I remember that Jesus said in John 15:11, "I have said these things to you so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete." Jesus seemed to be implying that he had found a source of joy which he wanted to share with others. It's kind of like a mission statement. I have found joy and now I want your joy to be complete. So let's explore that today. Juan Enrique Toro greeting you on this wonderful day, thanking you for the thumbs up, thanking you for the subscriptions, and of course those wonderful donations. All the links for the donations are below. Today we're talking about the wings of joy, the way in which the joy can liberate us. But first we have to understand a little bit that, we are wired, it seems to me, as human beings to run away from what hurts us, to detour, to dismiss, to deflect, to bury, deny, right? When something bad happens, we seem to be programmed to sort of want to turn away from it, to run away from it, to numb it out with all kinds of substance or distractions or activities. And what we've come to find is that if we don't actually face it, if we don't actually confront what hurts us, then we find ourselves with a bigger problem. And so we find ourselves between a rock and a hard place. It seems to be you're damned if you do, if you're damned if you don't. And it's the mystics and Jesus here seems to be telling us that we need to turn towards the pain, because we're going to do some kind of emotional alchemy. Right? You remember the idea of the alchemists who were wanting to turn lead into gold. They seem to be implying there was a process that can transform, right, something very heavy into something golden and beautiful. Paulo Coelho writes a book called The Alchemist in which he talks about that, and he says in that book, each thing has to transform itself into something better and acquire a new destiny. And I think this is what Rumi was talking about, that somehow we can take this hurt and embrace it and turn it into joy. And so we need to explore what it is that we're talking about here, and most importantly, how to do it. First of all, we need to understand that any time that we do run away from the hurt or the pain, it is going to make it worse, right? It is between a rock and a hard place. The only solution is to go within. We're going to talk about mindfulness today, being mindful of the hurt that you feel. And we need to be willing to come into a place of absolute allowing and acceptance of the hurt, of the pain, exactly as it is. We need to seek to resolve not the pain itself, not the hurt that we feel, but the emotional reaction that we have to the pain, because that is the source. We're going to the very source of the pain, and that's where we need to work. And so when I was a teenager, I had my first girlfriend, and she broke up with me. And this was a profound profound painful experience. But beyond the pain, there was some ideas, some things that I said to myself, some beliefs that came out of that. Beliefs like, I'm not lovable, or, I'm not good enough for somebody to love me. These are the beliefs that seemed to come up based on that experience. In other words, I had a reaction, emotional reaction to what had happened. And those beliefs I carried forward, which in turn caused even more pain. So when we're talking about being mindful about our pain, we're talking about shining the light of consciousness, of acceptance on the pain, and see how our reactions to the pain can simply bring us into a state of peace, or let's say what we're talking about today, joy. And so this is like the sun that is shining upon a forest that is covered in haze and mist, right? If the sun shines upon that haze, that cloudy expression there, sooner or later the haze will dissipate and we'll see the forest clearly. And so that haze is symbolic of our reaction, our emotional reaction to what has happened. We're shining the light of consciousness by being aware, by allowing, by accepting. That is symbolic of the sun. And so how is it that we turn pain, hurt, into joy? Well, emotional pain can only perpetuate itself when we identify with it. If we have a situation like I just shared about the girlfriend breaking up with me, there are things that I tell myself about that experience which create an emotional charge within me. I say I'm not lovable. I'm not worthy of being loved. Right? We can say things like I'm depressed, or I'm stressed, or I'm in pain. And when we say things like that, what we are saying, if you notice there's an I statement in there, we are identifying it. Right? I am depressed. I am stressed. I am not worthy. I am not lovable. Right? I am a loser. We're identifying ourselves with that. And so when we realize that we do have some kind of hurt, and we're willing to recognize it and to allow it, we can come and then understand that we don't want to resist it, we don't want to push against it. We're not looking for a way out, we're not looking for a resolution or a healing. All we're looking to do is to break our identification with it. That's what we're looking to do, because pure awareness will break that identification. When we just bring awareness to it, something magical is going to happen. Now the Buddha said, when the mind is pure, joy flows like a shadow that never leaves. When the mind is pure, joy follows like a shadow that never leaves. When the mind is pure, what he's talking about is when the mind is not clouded over by all of these false identifications. I'm a loser, I'm stressed, I'm depressed. When the mind is pure, in other words, when we see ourselves just as God created us, I am just as God created me. When the mind is pure, right, there is joy. When the mind is pure, joy follows, the Buddha says. So when we break our identification with the pain, what happens is a gap is created between us and the pain. We come to realize there's part of us that is hurting, that is in pain, but there is part of us that is free of it. It is the authentic self. It is the self that we could call the spiritual self. And now we see that there's a difference between the two. When we bring awareness to this, we come to understand that in that separation, in that identification, in that break of identification, we become free, right? That's where we find our freedom. This is a very important concept for us, because when we don't resist, when we don't judge, we're walking down the path that leads to an expression of something that we could call the innate joy of being. What we understand is that we're not looking for joy outside of ourselves, in the outside world, in activities. We're not looking for joy there. What we're doing is shining enough light, enough consciousness, enough mindfulness onto the false identification of self so that it dissipates and the authentic self comes through, which has in its essence an experience of joy. The joy is always there, in other words. We're not bringing it in. It's simply emerging once the cloud, right, of pain and hurt dissipates because of the light of consciousness we bring to it. Resistance strengthens our pain. When we choose to numb it, when we choose to detour from it, when we choose to not look at it, we're empowering it, we're giving it reality, we're giving it strength. And allowing, accepting, weakens the pain because of this break of identification. We come to see the I am of me, the spiritual self of me is not hurting. There is a part, which is my body, which is my emotions, which can be hurting, but it seems to not affect the true self of who I am. And so we could say to ourselves today, how? How do we do this? Well, if you've been following what I've been saying, we have first a path of recognition, right? We recognize there's something within me that is not right. It's leading me towards hurt, towards fear, towards worry, towards some sort of expression of pain. We recognize it. We begin exactly where we are. And then we do this very brave thing of allowing it to be. This too belongs. This too is part of my experience. Like I say, we can't control it. There's nothing we can do about these experiences that come our way except to shine the light of consciousness upon them. They're going to come inevitably, right? Sooner or later, there's going to be expressions that cause us some kind of hurt, some kind of pain, provoke some kind of reaction within us. Instead of resisting against it, numbing, or trying to run away from it, we allow it. We accept it. And then we can investigate, right? We can look into it. Where in my body am I feeling this? Right? We're shining the light of consciousness on this. We're bringing awareness to it by allowing it to be within us. We're not seeking to, heal it or get rid of it. We're just allowing and investigating. And in that investigation, we come to see that yes, this hurt is in my body. But you know what? I'm not my body. I'm not my emotions. I'm not even my mind. In truth, I am connected to a tremendous source of light and love. And so we investigate that. And when we investigate, we come into the realization once again of who and what we are. That break will heal our emotional reaction. An example I said earlier, through therapy, I came to realize that a lot of the source of my judgment and condemnation of myself had come from this experience with this first girlfriend who had broken up with me. I had told myself some beliefs which I accepted, which I gave power to, or identified with. And so what I'm talking about today is be able to see that, to bring the light of consciousness on it, and to see how it was that I reacted to that emotional pain. Yes, it was a painful experience, but what I did is I carried it forward based on the beliefs, the false beliefs that I held. And so as I recognize it, I accept it. I created these beliefs For whatever reason, I chose to carry them forward. I'm allowing them to be within myself. I'm investigating to see where it is that they hurt. But as I bring the light of consciousness to it, I see that, yes, that teenager was hurt. And the reaction to that caused a chain reaction of further hurt. And so as I shine light upon that, I can see that it's not a strategy that really serves me. And as I shine the light of consciousness on that, I can feel the release of that. And with the release of that comes the joy. And so just like Rumi says, the hurt you embrace becomes joy. Call it to your arms where it can change. You see, what he's talking about is embracing the hurt, allowing it, accepting it, investigating, and then adding some nurturing. The nurturing of shining the light of consciousness upon it will allow us to break the identification of myself as hurt, as depressed, as stressed, as overworked, as not worthy, as unlovable, etc., etc. And come into the fuller realization of who and what we are, and that new reality will in itself perform the transmutation, the transformation of that pain and hurt into what is already present, which is the joy of being. Right? The joy of being. And that's what we're talking about today. This writer, Abdul Baha, says, joy gives us wings. In times of joy, our strength is more vital, our intellect keener, and our understanding less clouded. We seem better able to cope with the world and to find our sphere of usefulness. Joy gives us wings. In times of joy, our strength is more vital, our intellect keener, our understanding less clouded. So you see, by shining the light of consciousness onto those hurt places, we become a more vital human being, more alive, strengthened, quicker, clearer. And the joy that we feel inside, the joy of being, lifts us, gives us wings. We find our freedom. So, we repeat once again, the hurt you embrace becomes joy. Call it to your arms where it can change. Juan Enrique Toro greeting you once again, thanking you for the likes, thanking you for the thumbs up and the subscriptions, and thank you so much for those donations. The links for the donations are below. Reminding you today and every day, life is consciousness, and consciousness is life.